Well, hello everyone. Thanks for sticking with me and coming back for Learning Outcomes 2 and 3 of Module 2. So this time around we're going to look at what we mean by regulation and how much regulation is a good thing. And we'll finalise that by looking at some specific theories regarding the regulation of financial reporting. And they tend to deal with the motivations of the people involved in regulation. So again, I'll look to share my slides with you. So Learning Outcome 2, we're going to look at the assumptions and the political influences of financial reporting. And Learning Outcome 3, we'll look at some of the competing theories that seek to explain what's going on with accounting regulation. So you'll get an idea pretty quickly, I think, that accounting is not exactly a value-free exercise. It's a very political exercise. So the people involved in accounting, whether it's the presentation of financial reports, the managing of companies, or the people who set regulation, are all involved in very political decisions. So this is very interesting, and I hope you enjoy coming along for the ride. So why would we bother to regulate financial accounting, and what are the alternatives for regulation? When the Great Depression hit in the 1920s, it quickly became obvious that there'd been a building history of some pretty dodgy accounting, and financial reporting had not been regulated to that point, and therefore people found that they could use it or not use it as the case may be. So financial reports could and did mask some bad decision making or some criminal behaviour, and in other words, the reports themselves could have been quite deceptive. And one of the outcomes of that was that when the Great Depression arrived, it arrived very quickly. So how much regulation is enough? Well, good luck to you if you can answer that question. All we can do, and all I can do from the perspective of this unit, is to give you some good information and access to some good theories that at the very least you should be able to make an informed decision, an informed judgment. First of all, we all assume that the accounting process is regulated. But what if it isn't? If there's no regulation, what would make accountants and managers look after the interests of stakeholders? Well, in economics, an unregulated market is known as laissez-faire economics. In other words, let the markets determine what's best. And in this sort of scenario, accounting information is a production outcome in its own right. So the market itself can actually determine what accounting information is needed and when it's needed. So you might think that's a bit curious. So let's have a look at how that might look. The key behind free market economics is that people will work and act in their own self-interest. You might think that's pretty shocking, but in a free market environment, managers do behave like this, and it's understood by the market, and indeed it's expected by the market. Why? Because the rest of the market is doing exactly the same. Shareholders buy and sell according to their own self-interest. Banks lend or not lend according to their own self-interest, and so on. So self-interest is a motivation that's very well understood. How does that play out into good accounting outcomes? Well, managers tend to enter into contracts on behalf of the firm that will build wealth and increase, therefore, their own personal remuneration. So this is a bit of a circle. Contracts will be entered into on the basis of the accounting information that the manager makes available. So, for example, another company won't deal with your company if it can't get access to the information it needs to make a decision. So it's in the accountant's or the manager's interest to make all the information available to close the deal. That's an example of the market determining what's good financial reporting and what's not. Now that goes a bit further. Firms and their managers will be penalised by the market if the accounting information they put out there is considered poor or insufficient. One of the outcomes of that will be that that firm will find it much more expensive to access capital next time it tries. So once you have a track record of some dodgy accounting information, it's very hard to leave that reputation behind. So that's an example of the market putting the brakes on dodgy behaviour. Stakeholders also know that without regulation, they need somebody to give them some assurance. So their prime form of insurance and assurance are the auditors. So they place a lot of trust in the auditors to make sure that what firms are telling them is in fact a fair representation of what's going on. Now there's some different arguments that centre around these themes. The first one is the market for managers. So the remuneration for managers and their awards into the future depend entirely upon what they've done in the past. So therefore, managers will engage in behaviour that will build their rewards into the future. So what's good for the firm is good for the manager. This assumes, of course, that the various markets are efficient, such as the labour market and, of course, the capital market, so that the capital markets can very quickly build in rewards for the manager on the release of good accounting information. Another argument is the market for corporate takeovers. So if a firm is not performing up to expectations, it can expect either to be put out of business by the market or, as an interim, that a bigger firm, a more efficient firm, will take it over. Now, this may not be good for the manager because quite often when big firms take over small firms, the management team of the small firm is kicked out because the big firm doesn't want them anymore because they're proven to be ineffective. So again, incentives for managers to maximise the wealth of the firm and to keep it growing. That's good for the shareholders, good for the firm, and surprise, surprise, good for the manager. And the market for lemons. This is how the market deals with bad news. So a quick lesson for the aspiring manager here, or the aspiring accountant, is that no news equals bad news for the market. So there's no point trying to cover up or not release bad news. If there's bad news to be said, get it out there. Why? Because you're going to be punished anyway. And the market is more likely to be lenient on managers who at least disclose bad news. If they suspect something bad's going on, you don't say anything, then the markets assume dodgy behaviour. And that's a whole different punishment from the markets. Another argument in favour of no regulation is if financial reporting is to be regulated, then that itself can have some bad consequences. So if the market is determining what accounting information is good and what's needed and when it's needed, then the market is saying, this is what we need, this is when we need it. On the other hand, when governments regulate, then it's a one-size-fits-all approach. And so regardless of what the market wants or needs at a point in time, this is what you're going to get, whether you need it or not. So one of the downsides of regulation and one of the arguments in favour of no regulation is that regulated accounting information is not at all responsive to what the market needs. Okay, so that's all your arguments in saying that the market can in fact look after itself, it can self-regulate. History tells us, of course, that that doesn't happen. And so it's the fact that we have a regulated accounting environment means that the market isn't trusted to act on our interests. The market can still be distorted by motives of greed, covering up poor performance and so on. So we have a regulated environment, and it's in most of all developed economies around the world now, there's a level of regulation of financial reporting. But it's not all rosy in regulation land. So let's have a look at some theories about regulation. We're going to look at public interest theory, private interest theory, and capture theory. So public interest theory is the feel-good story. This says that when governments pass regulations that tell accountants what to do, how to do it, how to publish the information and so on, they're doing so as custodians of the public interest. So when governments say, here's an amendment to the Corporations Act, this will tell you what you have to do, they're doing so to make sure there's a true and fair view being presented and that the interests of society are being maintained. Is this the fact? We don't know. Some realities creep in. Remember, this is a political process, and politicians are, of course, political animals. So does the presence of regulation always mean people acting in the public interest? Probably not. So let's have a look at some alternatives. Private interest theory is the dark side of public interest theory. This one says that when people regulate, they do it for their own private interest or self-interest. But what self-interest could politicians have, for example, in regulating accounting? Well, they want to be re-elected, don't they? So whenever there's some big corporate scandal, it's no surprise that the voters start saying, what happened to you, Mr. Government? Why didn't you act? Where were you? And the government of the day will turn around and say, well, we're going to get tough on bad people in the markets. We're going to have a whole set of new regulations. We're going to have new corporate watchdogs and so on. Whose interest are they really acting in? Are they acting in the public interest, or are they acting in their interest? Are they acting only to be re-elected? Who knows? But the benefit of theories like this, it makes you think about what's really going on. Just because a government passes new regulation doesn't mean that they're thinking of your best interest, the best interest of the markets, of the accountants, of the investors. So being aware of alternative motivations might lead you to be a more critical accountant in the future, and that won't be a bad thing. And an interesting deviation on private interest theory is that it's all well and good to have regulation, even in the best interests of society. But what tends to happen, according to this theory, is that the people being regulated and the groups being regulated find a way to capture the bodies that are regulating them. Why? Because it's in their self-interest to do so. If someone's going to tell them what to do, then at least they're going to be the people telling themselves what to do. And one case in Australia that's often been held up as evidence of this is the makeup of the Australian Accounting Standards Board. So that's a body, it's a watchdog set up by another watchdog, and they oversee the development of the accounting standards development in Australia. When you see the people who sit on that board, it's no surprise, is it, that it's largely made up of chartered accountants and CPAs. This has been held up as an example of classic capture theory. But is it really? Who best to sit on that board but professional, very competent accountants? Who else would you want sitting there? So I take theories like this with a slight grain of salt. Read them, consider what they're saying. They're useful to know. But don't fall into the trap of thinking that every theory put to you is indeed factual or to be taken at face value. And never forget that accounting is a political process. It's regulated by politicians. Companies report for political reasons. For example, if there's a big debate, such as there is in Australia at the moment, about banks making billions of dollars of profit, and you're the chief financial officer of a bank, and the reports just come to you that say that the bank has just made multi-billion-dollar profits, and you're thinking, uh-oh, this doesn't make us look good in society. Let's write off a few assets and see if we can knock that value down a bit. Our decisions are made in the context of a political environment. There's no escaping that. It's best to be aware of it. And so that's a quick wrap. That's a quick wrap of accounting theories in Module 2. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and get stuck into your textbook, do some close reading. Again, the slides that are available to you on Moodle are a good help for this purpose. And the theories you learn in this module will help you again and again as we develop the ideas in coming modules. So bye for now, and happy reading. Cheerio.